Please welcome the Reverend David Hogan.
Oh. Howdy, neighbors. Okay. Oh, well, another beautiful day. Good day to all of you fine people. My name is David Madison Hogan. Though most folks around here call me Uncle Davie and have for so long, I don't really remember when the title began. This day today happens to be my 92nd birthday. Whew. At least that's what my family informs me. I'm going to sit down. I've celebrated so many birthdays that I no longer keep close count of them myself. My son Henry and his wife have determined that this occasion requires considerable preparations. There is baking underway, there is decorating underway, and there is cleaning underway. And I've been informed that I am in the way of all three. Thus, I find myself banished from the kitchen, removed from the dining room, and exiled to this corner of the house under strict instructions not to interfere. So here we are. Fortunately, they exiled me in good company. This old desk and I have known one another for a very long time. Most folks see an old piece of furniture here. I see the Deerfield Post Office. I see neighbors coming and going. I see newspapers from Kansas. I see letters from Tennessee. Bills I wish never arrived, and news that changed lives forever. Funny thing about old furniture, it remembers. Or perhaps it merely encourages old men to remember. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I know what I was thinking of. I wondered where this got to. I was thinking that this came in. I don't get much mail these days. This is a telegram. It came in from the Cherokee Reservation, where until fairly recently, I made my abode as a missionary to those wonderful people. My granddaughter Olive and I are hoping to travel south when the weather improves. There are old friends among the Cherokee that I dearly like Olive to meet. Good people, the sort who improve a man's opinion of humanity. Yeah, that's going to be a wonderful trip. Funny thing, planning a journey often reminds a man of roads already traveled. Now, here's an old friend. This frock coat. Wow. Andy Johnson made me this frock coat in Greenville, Tennessee, autumn of 1836. Yeah, a long tail blue frock coat. Finest garment I ever owned. Oh boy, joints don't move like they used to, but praise the Lord, they still move when asked. There we go. Oh, that makes me feel good. Yeah, when I first came to Vernon County, oh man, a man was more likely to ask whether you were Baptist or Methodist or Presbyterian. These days, he wants to inquire whether the fellow fancies blue or gray. I've discovered that neither color improves a man's character nearly as much as some folks imagine. I have members of my congregation on both sides, friends on both sides, And I have buried men, women, and children on both sides. That is one of the peculiar sorrows of a border war. Then, on this war's second Christmas, I buried my own son, Cyrus. He was just 20. A band of raiders, we never found out what side they was on, shot my boy in the back when he was coming in from the South Fields. His sister found him, and, well, let's let that pass. Well, let me just say we didn't keep Christmas that year. Most folks imagine the post office is where letters are sorted. In my experience, it's where rumors are sorted. The letters merely travel farther. Let's see. These days, every newspaper that arrives seems to either be determined to prove that somebody is a traitor and someone else is a fool. The difficulty is the newspapers cannot agree which is which. Some of you are gathered here today in Nevada. Well, permit me to tell you that in May of last year, there was precious little Nevada left to gather in. I rode through after the burning. Homes gone. Businesses gone. Churches gone. Public buildings gone. I remember standing among the ashes and wondering how long it takes a man to build a town. And then wondering how little time it takes another man to burn one down. War is a poor guest. Once invited in, it seldom knows when to leave. I have family about 10 miles west of here in Fort Scott. About that same time, Union officers were preparing to burn the town rather than risk it falling into Confederate hands. My sister, Elizabeth Hogan Wilson, married the fourth sutler, and she lives in the former officers' quarters out there. Well, Lizzie stood on the steps of her home and informed the Bluecoats in language both firm and memorable that they would first have to answer to the women of Fort Scott. It was understood that if they burned her house, they were going to be burning her too. Whether it was her speech or the good Lord's providence, Fort Scott remained standing. The Confederates never came, and the town was spared the fate that befell Nevada and so many others along the border. I have often thought that courage wears more than one uniform. And yet, the mail still arrived. The crops still needed tending. Children still needed teaching. Souls still needed shepherding. The kingdom of God doesn't suspend operations simply because men are behaving foolishly. Nor does it cease because politicians are. Most mornings began just like any other. A letter from Tennessee, a newspaper from Kansas. This one's funny. It's got an article about that guy in the Revolution. He was famous at one time, General James Wilkinson. My oldest brother's named after him. Wilkinson Hogan. Lives over in Chilhowie. Well, this guy became such a scoundrel that my father changed my brother's name. Now he's Wilkerson. Been Wilkerson since I was a kid anyway, because that guy was a traitor. Anyway, it's hard to keep your politicians straight and keep liking them, isn't it? Anyway, sometimes you get a bill from St. Louis, someone wishing to borrow money, someone else wishing to repay it or avoid repaying it. The ordinary business of life. Then one morning, the ordinary business of life was interrupted.
Sergeant Hogan,
Oh, yeah?
riders coming down the creek.
Oh, that seldom sounds promising. Whose riders?
Cannot rightly tell.
That answer concerns me more than the first one.
Folks are saying there may be trouble.
Oh, folks are always saying that there may be trouble. The difficulty is that occasionally they're correct.
What do we do?
Well, get the women and children under cover. I'm suggesting the root cellar, and then pray that the men have more sense than they usually demonstrate.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Oh boy. That was life on the Big Drywood. Not just one little battle named for my ranch, not one raid, not one season of trouble. The war came, then it went, then it came again, went and returned. Soldiers passed through, then bushwhackers, then jayhawkers, then scouts, then foragers, then men who claimed to belong to one side while stealing from both. Sometimes a fella couldn't determine who had robbed him until after he'd gotten robbed. I learned that uniforms reveal less about a man than many suppose. This little piece of lead was found years later on my ranch. It struck a tree during the fighting at Drywood Creek, buried itself deep in living wood. The battle ended, the soldiers departed, the years passed. Yet the tree remained, carrying its wound, growing around it. I've often thought that Vernon County resembles that tree. We carried our wounds. We somehow continued to grow. At the time, of course, none of us knew how much worse matters would become. I certainly didn't, for I still had my home, most of my family, my ranch, my congregation, and thank the Lord, my long-tail blue. A man who possesses a good wife and a good coat ought never complain excessively. That, however, was before the fire. Before I tell you about the fire, I must first tell you about this coat. For it's difficult to mourn the loss of a thing unless you first understand why it mattered. Friends, this coat I acquired in Greenville, Tennessee, as I told you earlier, in autumn of 1836. Now, I was a seminary student there at the Greenville College. I was swept up in the Second Great Awakening over in a place called New Lebanon, Missouri, where my family had moved to be with our neighbors. Though our neighbors were all a little wild-eyed there in Kentucky and had removed themselves to Missouri because they were falling into disrepute with some of their shenanigans. Well, at least so we thought at the time. However, we all felt it got a bit lonely when everybody cleared out and moved to Missouri, and they were our friends. So even though we were old Presbyterians and they were Cumberland Presbyterians, we decided, can't beat them, join them. Not that we wanted to change religions, but we certainly wanted their company. So we moved to New Lebanon, and we moved into the founder's home. Finis Ewing's home had just been vacated. He moved to Lexington, and so his two-story brick house was available for our large family. Well, this coat, got to get back to that because I went across the street to a brush arbor revival for the sole reason of rescuing my sister. Sarah had been going across the street and we had noticed, and she was getting kind of excited. And she was down at the front, which never was good news for us in those days. So my brothers and I went to rescue Sarah. And because I was the oldest of the three brothers who went, William and James were a bit younger than me. I was pushed forward to go get her. I went forward and I pushed my way through the crowd, and I got up to that mourner's bench and I put my hand on Sarah's sister. I said, Sarah, you know Mom and Pop have no truck with this sort of... And I started speaking in a language I didn't know. I started shaking. I was overcome by the Spirit of God. And I ended up leaping up on that altar rail and calling the boys in the back to repentance, because I knew what they were doing. And they came forward and repented. But my brother William and my brother James spent the rest of their lives heading out the back door every time I headed in the front door. They didn't want what I had found. But anyway, I went off pretty quick to Greenville to study theology, to become a preacher for the Cumberland Presbyterians. I was licensed. And at school, two big things happened. The first was that they put me in a dormitory that was overfull. It was a new school. We were in bunk beds. The bunk beds were crowded. They were crowded with more than one person per bunk bed. And that sounds strange, but that was pretty normal, actually. Eastern Tennessee. And in my bunk bed, I was assigned, it was on the third level, had to climb a ladder. There was a 9-year-old boy. I was 22. Luckily, I had more room than a lot of people were sharing with somebody their same age. 9-year-old boys don't take up much room. And that boy was a chatterbox. He had grown up. His name was John Buttrick Jones, and his daddy was Evan Jones, missionary to the Cherokee. And this boy just talked a blue streak. After dark, after I was trying to sleep, he's telling me how great Indians are. I grew up in the Cumberland Gap. I mean, I have relatives without scalps, for heaven's sakes, you know? Indians are bad. Only good Indian's a dead Indian. At least that's how I grew up. This boy wasn't having it. He spoke fluent Cherokee. He'd grown up with them. He liked Indians a lot better than he liked most whites. And he just kept at me night after night after night until he converted me. He converted this Kentucky grandson of Daniel Boone. He converted me to liking Indians. Strangest thing. I didn't know how I'd explain it to my family. And then he went in on slavery. I mean, his dad was kind of famous for being abolitionist and everything, but boy, this boy was against it. And my dad owned 70 slaves. So I felt just on the point of honor, I had to argue back. That didn't work any better. Ended up turning me against slavery. So I got converted after I got to seminary. And I had made a deal with the president of the college, Henry Haas, to marry his daughter. And so that was already planned. But 3 weeks after I started school, President Haas died. And I ended up doing a funeral for my future father-in-law. And the family was in mourning, and my wife, my future wife, Elizabeth, isn't she wonderful? She made it clear that the whole family had decided to remove with me to Missouri. Oh, they had a bunch of kids. So suddenly I went from being a single young guy to being responsible for 7 kids. And anyway, at my father-in-law's funeral, I buried him and I needed a suit. So I went to the town tailor. This guy, Andy Johnson. Andy Johnson was the tailor in Greenville, and he made these blue frock coats. They were called long-tailed blues, and they were actually kind of famous. Okay, I needed this coat because I had to marry my wife Elizabeth just a few weeks later after the funeral. So 2 events, you need a nice coat. And so I commissioned this one from Andy Johnson. And for 3 decades, that blue tail frock coat improved me on every occasion that required more polish than farmer's duds. Finest garment I ever owned. I preached in it. I rode circuits in it. Oh, I love this coat. I married couples in it. I buried saints in it. I wore it through revivals, through camp meetings, floods, droughts. This coat accompanied me back to Missouri from Tennessee by flatboat on more rivers than I can count, and more miles on horseback than any coat ought reasonably to endure. There was even a song about such coats back in East Tennessee. I never imagined that mine would survive long enough to justify singing it to nice folk like you. So I ask for your forgiveness in advance. If you want to win a lady's heart, yeah, I'll tell you what to do. Go down to Andy's tailor shop and get you a long tail blue. Oh, for the long tail blue. Oh, for the long tail blue. There's actually a lot of verses which I am not about to inflict upon you. That was the verse about the place where I got mine. So it's a great coat. Now, Andy Johnson and I could hardly have imagined where life would carry us. He became president of the United States of America. I became a missionary. Looking back, I believe I chose the less hazardous occupation. In those days, I also came to know Mordecai Lincoln, Greenville's tanner and shoemaker, who served on the board at my college. He's cousin to Abraham Lincoln. I buried President Haas with him, and I recollect seeing him again at my wedding. This coat and I traveled together for nearly 30 years. And for most of those 30 years, there was something else riding in its pocket. Finding the pocket's the fun part. There we go. There was not this. There was a watch in the pocket, but that wasn't what I was talking about. There is also this little fellow. There he is. An 1839 dime. I don't think you can see it from there. The Seated Liberty 1839 dime. Still shiny after all these years. Most folks wouldn't think much of it. I certainly didn't when Father Finis Ewing, the founder of our church, tossed it to me. You see, as a young man, I enjoyed advantages that I did not deserve. I lived beneath Father Ewing's roof. Finis Ewing was the founder of our Cumberland Presbyterian Church. And Elizabeth and I cared for Aunt Peggy and Uncle Finis in their declining years. We ate at their table. I received his encouragement whenever I needed it, and his correction when I needed it even more. One Sunday, Father Finis invited me to share in Lexington, his church, the Great Brick Church. I prepared diligently. I prayed earnestly. And I preached with all the wisdom available to a young minister, which, as I later discovered, was not an inexhaustible supply. Partway through my sermon, Aunt Peggy got happy. Very happy. Then the congregation got happy. Before long, there was so much handshaking going on that I found myself unable to finish the message. Nowadays, that phraseology has fallen clean out of use. Let me explain what we meant by it back then. When folks got happy, they were experiencing the outward signs of being filled to the brim with God's Spirit. They would fall down under that power or else leap to their feet and fall to praising, speaking in tongues, and shaking their hands, their raised hands like they was trying to remove ants. Now, by Cumberland Presbyterian standards, that sermon constituted a considerable success. At dinner, Uncle Finis reached into his pocket and tossed a silver dollar across the table. David, he said, I figure that sermon was worth about that. Friends, I was honored beyond measure, not because of the dollar, but because Father Finis said it. Wow, that was precious to me at the time. The following Sunday, Father Finis again asked me to take his pulpit. I fear the previous week's recommendation might have improved my opinion of myself somewhat more than was strictly necessary. The sermon was less memorable. No one got happy. No one shook. No one even interrupted me. In hindsight, These should have been warning signs. At dinner, Father Ewing once again reached into his pocket and he pulled out a dime. And he said, I figure your sermon was worth about this. And he flicked it across the table to me. I don't know what became of that silver dollar. And yet ever since, I carried the dime. This dime has been a constant reminder in my pocket, pulled out to illustrate things in sermons. Not the dollar, the dime. In the pocket of my long tail blue. I suspect Father Ewing intended exactly that. The silver dollar greatly encouraged me at the time. The dime instructed me. Looking back, I believe the dime taught more. Well, so the years passed. The coat remained. The dime remained. Elizabeth remained. Children came, and the Lord remained faithful. Then came the war. And eventually, the fire. I wish I could tell you there was a single battle, one great calamity, one terrible day in which after which everything improved. But that was not the nature of our war here in Vernon County. The trouble with border warfare is that it seldom arrives all at once. It comes in pieces. A raid here, a robbery over there, a threat, a rumor, a disappearance, a burning, and then another. By then, Nevada had burned. Skirmishes had become common. The sound of hoofbeats could still a conversation. Every stranger was examined carefully. Every distant gunshot invited speculation. And every family learned where they should go should danger arrive. Our family had made such preparations. One doesn't live long on the frontier without learning prudence. But then, one day, the danger arrived. The details matter to me now less than they once did. What remains in memory is the accounting afterward, the realization of what we'd lost.